So, how on earth does someone decide that they want to create their own textbook? That wasn't necessarily my first goal. Just like many teachers, I was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the traditional published textbooks we were being given to use in the classroom. Where I teach, we don't have much of a choice of what textbooks to use, and the rare times we do, I feel there's no single textbook that's perfect. I like using a variety of resources. I often supplement textbooks with additional activities, readings, and assessments. I teach English to international students who are hoping to pass an English exam to enter the university. So the major focus is on teaching English through academic content that's adapted for non-native English speakers or readers. Teaching academic content and vocabulary is very important for these students, but unfortunately, literature is not considered important to cover. Fiction and nonfiction reading and classroom discussion help engage students, helps them develop critical thinking skills, and that's very important in higher education and includes academic language that can help them in the future. So what I did at the beginning was try to find ways to incorporate reading literature alongside working with the textbook. I organized all of the stories I wanted to cover into unit themes and focused on universal cultural ideas. I assigned these readings to be done as homework, while in class we worked in the textbook. Every Friday would be a reading discussion day. Sometimes this was disastrous. We didn't have enough class time to dedicate to discussing the literature or to dig deeper into the textbook readings. So I decided I was going to plan a whole term based on literature, particularly Greek mythology, since I had recently found some books that talked about words and phrases we get in English from mythological stories. My students trusted me, but they weren't happy about having to purchase a textbook that we wouldn't be using for class. Remember, as instructors in this institution, we don't get to choose our books. Our students pay a book fee and are given books from our inventory room before the first day of class. However, the director also didn't like this, as we're supposed to be preparing students for academic content. But isn't literature academic? Aren't our students going to be taking English classes at the university that will require them to read literature? What if they have a history course or a psychology course or an anthropology course that gives them a novel to read? Students need to learn how to read different genres, not to mention the need for building critical thinking skills. So I appeased our director by adding in academic articles and authentic readings from magazines and newspapers. It worked well because students could see a real-world modern connection to these ancient stories. This was the first time I 100% ditched our textbook. We only read mythological stories and news articles. My students loved it. They said it felt like they were in a real college classroom and not just learning English. Everything was going great. Students loved the stories and the academic readings I prepared, but I realized that only my students were benefiting from all this hard work I was doing. I wanted my readings, exercises, and assignments to be more than handouts. I wanted to collect them into one entity, and I wanted it to be something that other teachers could use. If we weren't going to use the textbook, I at least wanted to give them a sense of feeling like we were using a textbook. However, I realized that I was just putting together stuff from other books. I knew that wasn't legal to distribute. I also had photocopied pages of stories, so I couldn't edit it, and I needed to make them easier for my students to read and not as long. I was somewhat aware of public domain, and so I started finding some of the stories in old books from the public domain. I felt lucky that my topic covered mythology from thousands of years ago, I had accidentally found some public domain images to use alongside the text, as it was important for me to have pictures with the stories. So slowly, I was rebuilding my collection. But that meant all of the vocabulary exercises and questions I made for the previous stories, I had to scrap or redo. I had to start again, almost from scratch. But having public domain and digital texts was great. I was able to delete parts of the story that were extraneous. I could add in more details to make it clearer to international students. I could analyze the reading level and the vocabulary. I used a vocabulary database to check for obscure words, replace them with higher frequency vocabulary, and also analyze the readings for academic vocabulary, so that although they were reading literature, they were still being exposed to high frequency words that also appear in more academic texts. This wouldn't have been possible with fully copyrighted works and photocopies from books. I needed that ability to copy and paste the text. But still, the news articles and some of the images I used were still copyrighted. I contacted a course packet publisher to see how much it would cost to make my curated textbook. It was a giant pain for me to make a huge spreadsheet of all the copyrighted and Creative Commons and public domain licensed materials I used, and I had to contact some authors and creators to get express permission to use their work for educational purposes. Some of them asked for money, and I paid out of pocket just to use their work in my book. That was a huge mistake. Unless you are commissioning someone to do some work for you, please don't do that. I did not get Creative Commons licenses from them, and eventually I had to scrap and replace those materials. Even after all of that work, the cost of printing the course packet was going to be about $100. This is the opposite of what I wanted to do. So again, I had to go back and try to replace materials. And as I was looking for free images, I learned about places to get images that had Creative Commons licenses. So then, of course, I did a lot of research about what these licenses were and how important they were to helping me make a free textbook. I learned more about OER, and that became my new goal. I wanted this to be freely available to anyone. I learned that if I couldn't find the perfect materials, I had to make it from scratch or edit some OER materials. So some of the articles I wrote on my own, using my own research and Wikipedia articles. I would go on quote-unquote research vacations and take photos of Greek statues and architecture in different cities. I have the power to not only use resources that have Creative Commons licenses, but also to create works with these licenses so I can use them in my open textbook, but also anyone can use them. So I'm all about sharing and contributing to OER. Then I applied for and got an amazing OER grant from our university library. So for those requirements of the grant, here goes another round of revisions. At that time, my book was just a PDF file. I had used a very difficult coding system called LaTeX to create the textbook because I wanted it to be very professional looking. But it needed to be more accessible on the internet. So I had to rebuild everything again in Pressbooks. And because now everything is published on the internet, I had to be even more careful about what I use in my textbook. So now I have this amazing high quality work easily accessible on a website, but also a nice printable version of the textbook. Even 3 years after I won the grant, there are many changes I need to make to my open textbook. Some items in my book don't have Creative Commons licenses, but fall under the murky principles of fair use. So again, just to be safe, I want to find replacements for those materials. Some of the academic articles are just hyperlinks to copyrighted articles, which is fine, but it means anyone who uses it can't edit the text for their students' reading level. So I really want to find new readings that can be adapted, or I may need to write some new ones from scratch. One thing that I want to emphasize is that OER work is never done, and that is okay. Textbooks are always something that need to be updated and improved. So during the pandemic, I was a little lucky because I was using my OER textbook in my classroom. So making the switch to remote teaching was pretty easy. My students already had access to all of our class materials. And I received a lot of emails from other instructors from around the world, in China, in Vietnam, and Thailand, and other states in the US, who were very happy to find online materials they could use for their English language teaching. Because really, there are not many ESL OER materials. I'm so happy that I could help contribute to so many students learning, and that was my ultimate goal in completing this open textbook. In conclusion, the purpose of sharing my story is to prevent others from making the same mistakes I did. These mistakes cost a lot of time for me, and I'll still need to continue to work on updating my book to make sure it's a high-quality OER for the world. Some things I'm looking forward to updating are making sure I have complete tassel citations for all the works that I incorporated, even for public domain ones, and making sure my images have alt text for accessibility. I want to make sure my book is accessible and transparent. But really, I could have saved more time if I had made sure these things were in the book before I published. Although I've worked years on this book, I want to emphasize that this is the product of many iterations, revisions, and edits that I curated and worked on each chapter and implemented in my classroom, one reading at a time. You don't have to stop everything to work on creating OER. It can be a very organized collection of your lesson plans, readings, activities, and assessments that you have done. Take it one day at a time. Get feedback from your students about what's working and what isn't. Be open about your open textbook. Ask students for their feedback and help, especially for finding typos and unclear wording. Even better, you can make assignments where students could contribute to your textbook while also learning the course content. For example, I gave extra credit to students who completed additional exercises and allowed me to use their responses to help build the answer key. Those kinds of assessments can help you see what your students are learning, see how to adjust your teaching practices, but also give students a voice and powerful contribution to the education of future students. Open textbooks are for them. They should have a voice in the creation of them. Lastly, I want to encourage those creating OER to go beyond using OER. Go beyond the idea you have to create everything from scratch. Sometimes I had to sift through a lot of resources to find the perfect piece for my book. Sometimes I had to edit or make changes to that resource to make it fit. And sometimes I did have to make things from scratch. I made exercises, quizzes, tests, essay prompts, presentation prompts, took photos, and I made an instructor's guide and an answer key. It doesn't have to be just readings. And in the end, all that work made it a better product for my students and the world.